Hi, I wanted to share something kind of vulnerable and in the moment, something that I'm actually dealing with today and how it feels and what I'm finding out about myself and things about myself that maybe I didn't recognize before I deconverted and deconstructed, because that's such a process. You don't really know, other than removing the belief system in God, how much of your life was structured with that thinking. There's a phrase I've been using a lot lately, binary thinking. And I've recognized that in myself. Things are either good or bad, right or wrong, good, evil, or rather like godly or evil, I guess, when you're a Christian. Not for everybody, and not all faiths are extremist like mine was, but the binary thinking, I believe, can really set you up for um, for perfectionism, because it's either like good or bad all the time. There isn't a whole lot of I feel emotional talking about it. I'm sorry. It's the kind of thing that you'll get from me is just like the raw emotion of it. I have two toddlers, so sometimes it's really hard for me to like stop and do the thing when I need to do the thing. So I have to wait for nap time. But all day I've been struggling with perfectionism. Never saw myself as a perfectionist. I just thought I was trying to at least be as good as everybody else. Another part to this, I don't know, I want to get into how it's connected religiously, but I also found out that I have ADHD in January, and you know, two of my siblings out of four of us, so three of us now have medical diagnoses of ADHD, and my parents are very ADHD themselves, but not diagnosed. My house was kind of chaotic growing up, and with ADHD, you can lean into extremist mindsets, and well, for my dad, anyways, not everybody. I need to be cautious what I'm saying about these things too, because even though I have researched in the depths of ADHD, I still am very new in understanding how it affects me and my family. But being raised Christian, I've never felt good enough. And I've always tried really hard every day to be better. And I've always had such a pure heart that it's really sad to me to think that I didn't think that I was good enough when I was working so hard and always coming from a genuine place and an authentic place, where integrity and grit were extremely important to me. You know, being a hard worker and having something to show for it has always meant a lot to me. Anyway, I feel like I'm getting off a little bit. I'm gonna pause and collect my thoughts. So, ADHD is a diagnosis of essentially God, I don't really want to educate about this. I really don't. I just don't want people to hear that and then be like, ADHD is not like an adult thing that like is for hyperactive kids. So I always kind of feel like I have to defend that a little bit if I mention it at all. Just a short piece of information about it, because sometimes the things that I'm sharing, if other people are connecting to them, might intersect slightly, even though that is not what my my YouTube channel is about. But it's part of my identity, so that's why it ends up interlacing with the things I'm talking about. So ADHD is definitely a difference in the way our brains function from neurotypical. There is an issue with dopamine reuptake, essentially. So we don't have access to as much dopamine in our brains as a neurotypical person would. This causes us to be stimulant seeking. We're looking for ways to raise our dopamine so that we can feel motivated. So oftentimes, you know, laziness, lack of motivation, all those things really get wrapped up into the way we see ourselves, even though we're working so hard not to. So I almost feel like I cannot talk about being a perfectionist without also shedding light on myself, the way my brain functions, and how religion has also deeply affected my mind and my thoughts and the way I feel about myself, because they are connected for me. So essentially, when I have the right amount of dopamine available in my brain, I feel much more at ease. The anxiety, the feelings of the walls crushing in and never being able to complete something or get something done, those those overwhelming feelings fade when I take medication, and then that allows more dopamine to be available in my brain to use. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, so it's basically connecting lobes of your brain to each other by sending messages about what's going on. That's why there can be a lot of forgetfulness, what appears to be laziness and lack of motivation, which is really, truly, actually a disconnect in your brain to be able to do things that you need to do. So this also brings me to lack of consistency in my life and always needing structure. So I desperately needed structure growing up, but my house was very chaotic. And I think that my father, though undiagnosed, even though he is probably way more typically ADHD and hyperactive than anyone else in my family that have ADHD diagnoses, I think he really needed the structure. I think he needed a black and white system to plug into to say this is right and this is wrong. And that gave him something he couldn't provide for himself. He needed it. And then us kids needed it, because church was the only structure in our lives. There was no bedtime. There was barely any food. When there was food, poverty, food stamps, dad going from job to job, which is an unfortunate problem with undiagnosed ADHD. You lack motivation to keep going. And then when you get bored, you go find something else because you're bored out of your mind and you don't know why you can't just get the shit done that needs to be done. So my dad, dealing with that, ended up being very impulsive and would often quit jobs. But we had this faith that God was going to take care of us no matter what, all the time. And we really did find peace in that. But there were definitely, you know, days where the electricity got shut off and we huddled together under a blanket in our trailer living room with kerosene heater lit so that we wouldn't freeze because it was the wintertime. There were some very, very hard struggles for us, even as Christians who were supposed to be being blessed by God, because we paid our tithes, and often our tithes before our light bill. So life was hard for me as a kid with all of this chaos, right? And so as the oldest child, I tended to be the one, I think, trying to take care of my family. And I really, really leaned into the structure of religion because it was the answer, and it gave me all of the things that I needed, the rights, the wrongs, I had a book with all the answers in it. It sucked when I started to find contradictions and things weren't lining up, and I'm like studying so hard trying to prove my faith, trying to, make it impenetrable, right? And then I studied my fucking way out of it, which sucks, but because I wanted the structure. I really did. God, I missed it. I miss the structure so much, because having my brain means that it's so busy. ADHD is like an overactive brain, right? Because things aren't communicating properly. So you're just kind of like flooded with information all the time, and you're just trying to decipher the information. So focus is like religious studies and actually having like real answers, right, for things really helped me organize my life when I was struggling so hard. So I want to talk about how I definitely deal with a thing called RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And I'm extremely sensitive to what people think of me, which is one reason why religion was really helpful, because I wasn't supposed to care what people thought as long as I had all of my fruits of the spirits exposed, and so I was constantly just trying to be as perfect in the image of God as possible. And then when people persecuted me or didn't like me, it didn't hurt as much because I felt like that was what I was supposed to be expecting. So when I left faith and then living this beautiful life that I'm creating for myself, and then people being like, you suck, you're a stupid atheist. Like, how do you think you know better than God? And all kinds of, those types of things. It really has made me kind of shrink back a little bit in some ways, because even though I am courageous as hell, I really am. I believe that is something that, despite the fear and the pain and being extremely sensitive to rejection because of dealing with constant failures and shortcomings my whole life, struggling with ADHD, and then also just trying to become a minister as a woman in the Church of God, which was really hard to do. Not without my husband's blessing and covering, of course. But man, those things just really piled up. Being told I didn't need school or anything, I just needed to marry someone because I would be under his covering anyways, and having my education stolen from me, not being allowed to learn things like evolution and science, and just being behind with all of that stuff, even beautiful artistic things like music that I missed out on. My point here is that I even though I'm extremely sensitive to judgment and try so hard to be perfect, there is a vulnerability in me that I actually learned as a minister. I really believed that vulnerability was the bridge to intimacy. I still do. I still do, but I remember discovering that in ministry, wanting to connect with the hearts of people. And I was a vulnerable leader, and I believed it to be the most powerful way to lead. But I don't think that had anything to do with ministry. I think that's just my heart and how I learned how to connect with people. So even though I'm always scared to death, I've posted quite a few videos that I instantly made private because I just felt scared that people wouldn't get me, and I wouldn't be able to explain myself or defend myself or make sense of it for other people. But I really do need to share my story from a place of vulnerability and shed the last bit of the things that make me scared, which are rejection and judgment. I don't have a promise of perfection anymore that I had in Christ. And I think that is still a little bit hard for me not being able to trust myself, not being able to be decisive, and then also still processing and learning, even though I have so many coping mechanisms. And honestly, as a 35-year-old newly diagnosed woman with ADHD, I have got a lot of fucking shit done. I don't really rest or ever sit still, but I really have come a long way from poverty, and I have a lot to be grateful for. So I want to share. I want to share from this place where there really is lots of pain, and though there is joy, so much freedom. Oh my gosh, so much freedom. And I can sometimes, like, I'll be sad like this, right? And then I'll just think about, even though it's been such a hard road to get to this deconverted place, it feels so good to know that I am here. Anyways, that's another thing I got to be careful of, because I did it a lot in faith, right? I'm sure you've heard the term toxic positivity. It's okay to fucking feel sad, man. You're supposed to. Your feelings tell you things. Your emotions are communication, right? They're my body, my heart, my head. These things are all a part of taking in the world around me and processing it. And it's okay to be sad. In fact, it's a massive part of grief. Letting go, shedding it all. Like, you're allowed to, more than allowed to. This is like, you have permission to be really fucking going through it, man. Like, you've got permission to fall apart, to just be a completely destroyed house, right? Deconstruction has happened head to toe. You're rebuilding from the ground up. It's okay. You're allowed to be. We should be. It's just like God isn't coming with any of the answers to help us figure it out. We have to do it ourselves. But God damn it. Like a job hard worked at and well done that you did all on your own feels so much fucking better than giving all the damn credit to a God that doesn't even exist, right? Like, I mean, I remember sharing my testimony on stage and stuff, and being a very vulnerable leader like I was, especially with the youth group. I self-mutilated in my early 20s. I really, really struggled with self-confidence and self-esteem and a lot of those things. I mean, who wouldn't, when you literally find out that you're worthless without God and absolutely nothing without him, and then you kind of like lean into that worthlessness, and those feelings can really take over sometimes. And then there's a lot of pain and confusion because there's a lot of rejection I dealt with in the church in my early 20s. When I got married, and my church my dad didn't agree with it. So then my church had to support my father. But anyways, let me come back to the subject here. As I would share that stuff vulnerably, right? Like I would get on stage and I would share in the moment. Like, I had a fresh cut on my arm and I'm really struggling with this stuff, guys here, teenagers, is what I'm going through. Like, we can get through this together. And I would be that type of vulnerable where I would expose the things I was going through at the time, and people connected with it. And it's always been the way that I connect. But before there was a promise of getting like to perfection. And now I feel like the judgment of the outside world can be overwhelming to me as I'm trying to, it kind of is. Most of the time I don't give a shit, but then some of the time that I do, because I gave up all of my most intimate connections, leaving faith. I can't talk to those people about the things that I used to talk to them about, because we had the same purpose in life, salvation for the lost, and in the same center and in the same faith. It was really easy to connect on those topics. But now Even some of my closest friends, don't understand why I'm atheist, or definitely aren't themselves. So there's a lot to share about the pain and the vulnerability. I feel like I'm kind of losing myself a little bit here, and I don't want to go past 22 minutes. I'm going to collect my thoughts and recap and finish. I want to get back to perfection, which is where I was trying to go with that. John 17:23. I in them and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that thou hast sent me, and hast loved them as thou hast loved me. I remember talking to my dad about if you could really be sinless, because he believed with all of his heart that you could be sinless, and then the guilt and the shame that he would feel when he would stumble was outlandish. And while I really did feel like I was pretty close to perfection as far as sinlessness went, I literally tried to decide what all the sins were so I could write them down and make sure I didn't do any of them. And perfection meaning to be blameless and without error. It was extremely important to me. And I always idolized the women that appeared to be perfect. So today, when I shared on Facebook, I'm just going to read what I shared. I get really depressed about my shoulder. I injured my shoulder. I'm a rugby player. It sucks. I really want to be playing right now. It's extremely helpful to me to be active, especially having ADHD and needing focus. It helps to stay grounded. Anyways, I get really depressed about my shoulder. My inactivity blows, but it fucking hurts constantly. It was so hot yesterday, and I was outside. It was like 70 something. In a long sleeve because my arms are terribly out of shape. I was in full dread mode as I picked clothes for my too tight closet. I wanted to look cute, but also not be hot. Nothing worked. As I started to let that "you're such a failure" mindset set in, I became super anxious and critical of everything. Even on my medication, which really usually helps take the edge off of that. I know I have to work through this shit, not being a perfect weight, having perfect skin, keeping a perfect house. These things don't define my success. See, I say that and everything in me shouts, yes, they do! My head. Your house is for your kids' well-being because you didn't get a clean house. You know how much they need it. Also, my head. Your face is a direct reflection of your industry. I'm a beautician. An ability to take care of yourself. Looking a mess is unacceptable. Still my head. Your body, well, don't you want a fucking sex life? Isn't it important to show your kids how to be healthy? You don't have that example. You didn't have that example. You have to be successful in your weight, muscle tone, and eating habits, or you will fail your children. If I could just counter these thoughts with something more compassionate, that would be great. Because they are loud, and I don't know how to give myself room to grow without criticizing the imperfections that I'm sure everyone has. I mean, even my eager search and desire to fully incorporate a reconstructed worldview and better grasp of religion and science is so that I don't fail my children. Being in a transition their entire childhood with no real answers for them, mommies are supposed to have answers for the babies. Still figuring things out feels like a failure. I know life is about the growth, the experience. It's good that my children see my courage and zeal, that I'm working towards wholeness and won't ever have a finished project to turn in, but it also feels scary. I had someone comment, which was a good comment, and then that's kind of where I started to see the religious connection for me. My friend said, acceptable margin of error needs to introduce itself. And I said, I have no idea what that looks like. I've always been very hard on myself, and I've always considered it the reason I'm just kind of failing and not full on failing. Like if I let up, I will just roll with it and not be successful. I don't treat other people this way. I have so much grace and compassion for others, but for myself, it's a very black and white. I've had this theme this month that I've recognized of binary thinking, one way or the other, nothing in between. I'm either good, bad, successful, or failure. It feels hard to see my life in phases with things under construction. I'm terrified to incorporate acceptance. This is where it starts to connect me to my religious thoughts. It feels like a license to not be good enough. And when I read that, I immediately realize that this is very much a religious construct I had growing up. An excuse equals a license to sin. There is no such thing, and perfection through Christ was attainable. And you didn't stop perfecting your life. And my friend said, so it's beating yourself up and then beating yourself up again, or doing that to begin with, secretly equaling overachieving? Is achievement equal to suffering? And I was like, yeah, actually, one of the fruits of the Spirit is long suffering. In faith, long suffering is a fruit of the Spirit. You get used to being unworthy, because that's why you need God to begin with. If you have Him, though, perfection through Him is the ultimate goal. So God who begun a good work in me, right? It's like just this constant drive to be perfected person, right? Because God's love is perfect, and Him in me is perfection. Like, oh, I remember why I was sharing that thing about vulnerability. I'm sorry, I didn't get to wrap that up because I couldn't kind of finish my thought. But his perfection in me is why I could share these really vulnerable moments of being like screwed up, like cutting myself, my self-mutilation and stuff, because I could give Him all the glory for when He was going to bring me through it. Just watch, guys, my testimony is going to be amazing. And I would really lean into that. Like, God's going to show me how to get through this, and He's going to fix it. And those were the reasons it was easy to be vulnerable, because I really trusted God. I put all my eggs in that basket that He was going to get me through the shit that I was going through. And I did always find a way out of it. I realize now that I didn't really heal from the things that drove me to cut my own body up. I hate to be frank about it, but you gotta be going through some shit to feel worthless enough to scar yourself. But I was always smiling, right? I haven't cut myself since I left Christianity. I haven't felt like worthless without God. I still have a lot of worthlessness that I'm dealing with. But like intellectually, I know that I don't need God. And I know that like who I am is not dependent on someone else's perfection. And I know that I'm not just inherently bad, that I'm actually a really fucking cool chick. And so because I intellectually know these things, I mean, the work on the trauma internally is still going on. It's definitely still going on. Don't get me wrong. There is a lot of things being triggered and brought up, and thank goodness only parts come up at a time, and you can breathe and take it apart. My friend always says unpack it, because there are some things you kind of have to tuck away sometimes until you have the capacity to handle how big that thing is. And perfectionism is a pretty big thing for me right now that I'm trying to work through. I remember, I should probably trigger warning this about self-mutilation, but I just remember that release of pain happening. But God died for me. Why wasn't that good enough? Well, because I was still bad. My body was still bad. I remember feeling like good sometimes and being like, man, I'm really working these spiritual gifts. I'm doing a good job. And then going, no, it's not me. It's Christ that lives in me. And like just never, ever fucking being able to take credit for all my goddamn hard work. And now I'm like, I'm awesome because I'm working at it. And I'm I'm dealing with some shit, and I'm still working through that old mentality of not being good enough, and other reasons I don't feel good enough, like, you know, the shortcomings of not really ever being able to complete things I'm starting, and having issues with ADHD, which I will apologize if there's inconsistency on this channel. It really is a work in progress for me. But I'm writing down my goals. I'm going to start really working through a lot of that. I downloaded a video editor that I'm going to work to learn, which I'm excited about. I actually got the computer that I got because I was really excited to start a YouTube channel and to be able to edit my videos. And here we are, 3 years later. Haven't done it. I was very busy, you know, deconstructing and reconstructing my life and all, but it's because I wanted to blog it. I wanted to share it. I'm a writer. I love to write. And when I can think through things and write them, then I can like fix it. And, you know, but when it's my person in my face and I don't know how to edit video, like I can edit my words as they come out and I can go back and check it, right? But on video, if you don't know how to edit things, it's like pause, okay, rewind, and you can't figure out how to say it. But with words, you're typing it out and then you're publishing. But when it's your face, you're actually like, anyways, I really hope I can get through some of my insecurities. I'm a little over where I wanted to be, but I still think it's truncated enough message, as I like to say, if I'm even using the right word. Who knows? Who knows? I get that screwed up all the time. Okay, I feel like I'm being a little quirky, but in a good way at this point. I hope anyways. I hope I'm likable. God, why do I care about being liked so much? Oh, one of these days. I'm working on my self-esteem. I'm working on rebuilding myself. Rebuilding what I know is good about myself. Now that I've recognized that, like, I didn't lose everything that I was or who I was, that all of that was always me anyways, I'm gonna rebuild that shit. I'm fucking rebuilding it. I'm excited. I'm excited to see, like, my confidence start to turn around. Because you can be incompetent in some things. Like, I'm a badass hairstylist. I'm really good at it, I think. Now, if anybody ever got a bad haircut from me, they're going to be like, liar. No. I really haven't given very many bad haircuts. I've made mistakes, but I was always pretty good at actually fixing them. So, anyways, rambling. All right. I can see that I've reached my capacity for staying on target and track. And I even, like, messed some of that up along the way. But, yeah. Working on building myself. I want to share some vulnerable thoughts today, some things that I was going through in my own home and in my own life, and how they relate to the way that I was raised, and what I need to change about in my thought process and the binary thinking, and how acceptance, even though I haven't quite figured it out yet, acceptance of, you know, just like the middle ground is fucking okay. Like, it doesn't have to be like the best or the worst. There are like things in the middle, right? Yeah. Gray areas. No. All right. I'm signing off. I hope you connected to this video. I hope that you find healing, and that you can find your own self-confidence, because, man, it sucks to think that you're worthless. Nobody should feel that way. Nobody should feel that way and then just get to put a God sticker on it and it's supposed to make it better. No. Don't fucking tell your kids they're worthless. Don't tell them that without God, they're nothing. You're a whole fucking person all by your damn self. You are your own.